Well, today we have a special treat. We have a guest speaker here with us, Brother Millton Sewell. And he comes to us from Tennessee, him and his wife, Laurel. He has been the president of Freed-Hardeman University, or was the president of Freed-Hardeman University for 18 years, and is currently the chancellor and has been for the past 12 years. If you're not familiar with Freed-Hardeman University, it is a Christian university in Tennessee that is associated with the Churches of Christ. And it's a great school. And I'm excited to hear a little bit about that today as well as he gets ready to preach for us. But Randy, you were talking about getting older and forgetting. I can't wait until I get there so I have an excuse why I don't remember things. Brother Milton, how long have you been married to Laurel? 55 years married. They have 3 children, and one of their grandchildren is actually working at a ranch south of here, and that's one of the reasons that they were out here, not only for Sarah, but we'll let her think it's the main reason. But we're glad to have them here, and Brother Sewell, we're ready to hear you preach the word.
Hey, David. How are you? If you will get your Bibles and turn to Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12. We'll be looking at this very closely in the next little bit and talking about what it means to be a real Christian. And I want you to start thinking in your mind, who are some real Christians that you know? It may be you, and it probably is, but think about others whom you know. And here in this congregation, who you would just point to and say, they are really Christians. And these are the reasons why I see and believe that they're Christians. I can just see the characteristics of being a Christian. Before I get into this, I want to express our appreciation for the opportunity of being here today and to seeing Diane Kondo. This is the first time since 1978 since we've seen you. She's the first one that in this congregation we've seen that we've known. And of course the Johnsons. The Johnsons, a good friend of ours, said that they are coming back from the mission field and they want to get some additional training. And I was president at the time, and this friend of mine called and said they need a place to stay. And I said, come on, stay with us. We're going to be out of town. The key will be in such and such a place. There, you just come on in and you'll find your room and go there. And we'll be in late and we'll meet you at breakfast the next morning, which we did. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful blessing. And we've enjoyed having the Johnsons in Henderson. They've just become dear friends. We've seen them grow. We've seen the children grow. And we're just looking forward to Sarah being with us this fall. Let me tell you just a little about Freed-Hardeman. It is a Christian school. All the faculty are faithful, dedicated Christians. 85% of the students come from Church of Christ homes. And of course, we still have about 15% that do not. And many of those become Christians because every student takes a Bible class every semester, and they're given tests to see whether they know what's in the Bible. And we have about 200 are majoring in Bible, and there are several other majors that they can take, whether it's in medicine or education or business. We have many of our students that go on. About almost 100% of our pre-med students are able to make it into med school and complete it. And dentistry, 100%. Pharmacy, the same thing. And the schools of business, they do very well. But I want to mention one thing to you. Our baseball players, some of our athletes come in are not Christians when they come. And we see that as a mission field within itself. And the baseball coach, Jonathan Estes, who does a great job in working as a coach, has winning teams every year. But one of the players came to him and said, Coach, he said, I've been in Bible class and I've been studying. He said, I read where you have to be baptized to be a Christian. And he said, I've never been baptized. And I want to know what I need to do, because I want to be a Christian. And from what I've studied in my Bible classes, I'm not. And if something should happen to me, I would not make it to heaven. So they had a further Bible study with him, and he said, "Coach, I want to be baptized." And he said, "I want you to baptize me." He said, "Not only do I want you to baptize me, but I'd like for all my buddies, because many of my teammates are not Christians either. And I want them there when I'm baptized. I want them to see what's going on." And so they had decided at one of the local congregations where Jonathan attends. Jonathan was having him there, and one of the elders, who's a little bit straight-laced, was telling me about it. And he said, "Milton," he said, "when Jonathan put Seth under the water and brought him up, those guys got to hooping and a hollering as if he had hit a home run." Then he looked at me, he said, "Well, he had. He had hit a home run." Not only had he hit a home run, 7 of the baseball players have become Christians. And one of them has converted his girlfriend and baptized her. See, that's what Christianity is all about. It's so good if you live the Christian life and set the example. And we believe that we see that all the time in our faculty and staff and the students and the homes from whence they come. They come from some very wonderful homes. I'm assuming today, as I present this lesson to you, that most all of you are Christians, have been baptized for the remission of sins. And if you haven't, I would encourage you to do it as soon as you can, because it's dangerous. Because it's a terrible thing when a person dies and they've not become a Christian. But it's a wonderful thing. There's so much hope when a person dies and they've been a Christian. It's a pleasant, because you can start thinking about the good things that they're going to be enjoying. I was asking one fellow one day, I said, "What are you going to be doing? Who do you want to see when you get to heaven first?" And he started telling me different people he wanted to see that he had not gotten to be with on earth. And it was just as real for him as it could be. Isn't that a pleasant thing? Think about those people that you want to see. So the importance of being a Christian. But I would encourage you to take a look at Freed Hardeman, those young people that are here. Go and look and see. It is a far piece from here to there, but don't let that stop you, because we have students from China, Russia, from all over the world, about 2,100 students, but 85% are members of the church. And you sit in those Bible classes and it makes a difference in your life. What are some characteristics that we see in Romans chapter 12? If you look at Romans chapter 12, these characteristics you'll see that are of real Christians, those that are living the Christian life. And 1 Corinthians chapter 12 have some of the same things that we find in Romans chapter 12. But a person who is a real Christian gives himself or herself to God. Totally gives themselves to God. You're becoming a living and a holy sacrifice. Back in the Bible we see sacrifices, but they were all of dead things. But he's saying give your body as a living sacrifice if you want to be a real Christian. Acceptable to God. What is it that God wants for your life? It's a reasonable and spiritual service. He wants you to serve Him, not for your good, not for His good, but for your good. It's important that we look and serve Him. Isaiah in chapter 6, verse 8 says, he was in a vision there. And they said, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" And he said, "Here am I, send me." And I've heard the Johnsons say, "Here am I, send me. Let us go." Go tell the people what they need to do in order to go to heaven, because you want to see everyone go to heaven. In 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 5, the early Christians first gave themselves to the Lord. And that's what we're saying here. Give yourselves to God. Say to God, I'm yours, God. You're number one in my life. The most important decision you'll ever make in your life is when you become a Christian and dedicate yourself to life. And then that second person is that wonderful spouse. Since you've mentioned about we're sort of taking a little honeymoon after 55 years. I met her when she was a first grader. And seriously, I was a third grader, a very mature third grader, I might say. And she, then we had our first little date when she was, we had a little Coke float at a drugstore after a typing class during the summer, when she was an 8th grader and I was a 10th grader. And then 7 years later, we got married after going to Freed-Hardeman for 2 years and to Harding 2 years, and then coming back to Florence to teach school. But that's important in our lives. Giving yourselves to God. As a little boy, I heard a missionary talking about they were over in the African area and they were meeting under trees and in their houses sometimes. Sometimes the weather was bad, and so they decided that they would have a building fund and build a church building. And they wanted something that's structurally strong enough that they could go. Nothing big or elaborate. They were very poor people. They decided on a Sunday that they would have a building fund campaign where the people would bring what they could to give to that building fund. They drew a circle in the sand and the people stood around the circle. There was one gentleman there that just barely had enough clothes on to be decent, and they knew he had nothing. He was the last one to give. When it got to him, they were looking to see what he was going to give. Some had given cows or pigs or vegetables or fruit or money or whatever. But when it got to him, he stepped inside the circle and gave himself. And that's really what this is talking about right here. Amen. Step inside the circle and give yourself to God. What I'm seeing in real Christians, that they are changed people. They're different. I remember a fellow that was, no one wanted to go near him or near his community because so many people had been shot in that area. And there was all kinds of trouble. And the law enforcement was there many times. But a brother, he got shot by somebody, and a brother in Christ started going to him on Friday night and teaching him. He said, when I get out of this hospital, I want you to come and teach me. Well, he got out of the hospital. He didn't at first want it, but he got shot again. He said, if I can get out, I want you to come and teach me. So he did finally, and not only did he, every Friday night his wife would cook dinner, and he would have his children and their spouses, and they would all gather in. He said, I want them taught. The last time I checked, he was an elder in the church. Totally different image. The becoming a Christian changed his life. And real Christians, their lives changed. Some are not as drastic as that, because there are people that are good people, wouldn't curse, wouldn't do anything bad that they knew of because they've been taught better. But he says that don't be just like the world. I suspect that many of you have said, there's something different about you when you're around people. There's something different that I notice about you. And finally, when you realize, or when they realize, you're a Christian, because you're not cursing and you're not cheating. You're not talking bad about your spouse. You're not doing a lot of things that sometimes. But when we become a Christian, we are changed. We're transformed. We refresh our minds by studying. The way that Laurel and I find that helps us to refresh our minds is we read a chapter in Proverbs every day. So we go through 12 times, the whole book 12 times a year. And we see something new every time we read it. Have you noticed that? And then we try to read at least 2 chapters in the New Testament. This is just sort of personal, daily something to sort of refresh our minds and keep us fresh in what's going on. You may have something totally different that works for you, but it's a way of being transformed. You're being transformed to prove that you're God's. You're changed because I want to be on God's side. I want Him to know that I'm in His camp. To what is good and acceptable in the sight of God. What does God want from me? So real Christians don't think too highly of themselves, according to Romans chapter 12. They use sound judgment, and they have wisdom. And a lot of that comes from just reading the Word. The Proverbs, of course, helps in the reading of that. In Matthew 7, verse 12, the Bible tells us how we really need to be. As you would that men should do to you, do ye even so unto them. And those of you who studied business, you'll see the foundation of the business courses across America is to treat your customers right, and they will treat you right. And I see some of you shaking your heads on that. And that is a biblical principle, and it works. Now, sometimes we can get to thinking too highly of ourselves and carry a chip on our shoulder and our feelings on our sleeve, and we get sort of our feelings hurt easily. And we're thinking too much of ourselves when we're doing that. And we get offended by somebody, somebody gets offended over some little thing that really doesn't matter a great deal in the long run. But a Christian is changed, and they don't think too highly of themselves. They think, I'm a child of God, and I'm trying to do what's right. When you look at real Christians, you can see the big picture of the church. The church is a big thing. Many members. And you and I can travel around the world, and we have brothers and sisters in almost every town around the country. Not all. But we have brothers and sisters that we can call on. Occasionally, I remember one time Laurel and I were traveling in another town, and we're taking 2 young men that were students at Freed Hardeman, and our car broke down. And I thought, what am I going to do? I called the church in that community and told them who it was and what the problem was. She said, well, the dealer of that particular brand of car is sitting right here by my desk. He's a member in our congregation. He said, he got on the phone, he said, I'll have a mechanic there in just a few minutes. And if he can't fix it, I'll have a tow truck. They'll pick up your car, and I'll bring you a car so that you can go on. And that's what had to happen. And then they took the car, gave us a car. We came on back to the campus. A few days later, he called and said the car is fixed. So I took it back and I said, how much do I owe you? He said, nothing. He said, you're doing the Lord's work, and I want to be a part of that. Now, Christians do all kinds of good things to help one another out, and I see it all the time. Another is we use our gifts. He says for you to use your gifts, your talents, your abilities. And some are faith gifts. Some of those gifts that you have that are faith, that you're going out to help others and serving others. Or teaching. If you have the gift of teaching, you teach others. We all have certain types of gifts. Some are spiritual, some are physical. Now, let me see, how many of you are left-handed? God gave you that. How many are blue-eyed? How many of you are brown-eyed? Okay. See, you had nothing to do with those gifts that God gave you. Some are right-handed. God gave you that gift. And some of you have gifts of being able to be a teacher or to be an encourager. And I just got a sense in this congregation. If you were to think about who is it in this congregation that is such an encourager, I picked up on a lot of it out at Sarah's party the other day. And wasn't that neat with Sarah's party? She's a homecoming queen. Miss Sandpoint, valedictorian, all of those wonderful things. And another gift is of generosity or giving. You give liberally. And I've sensed, I would have thought your contribution would not be anything like that. And I understand your contribution has stayed up even during this thing. That says a lot about you folks. You're a generous people. You're givers. And that's wonderful. The congregation where I've attended, we've been down below the budget twice during that time, but well above all the other times. And I'm finding that in other congregations, the same is true. You'd have thought it would have gone down, but it's gone the other direction. In fact, one congregation, theirs jumped about $7,000 or $8,000 per Sunday. Wow. Because several in the congregation had lost their jobs. And they stepped up and wanted to help members of that congregation. Now that's what being a Christian is all about. Don't you like being a Christian? It's a wonderful thing to be a Christian. He says also in leadership and being merciful, being cheerful and merciful. I remember a little boy when I was president of Mars Hill Bible School. Every Thursday I would go to that campus and to the campuses and conduct chapel. We'd have singing and the Bible reading and prayer. And I always enjoyed the little boys that would lead a prayer. And there was a little boy, a little kindergartner, that especially had a prayer that I thought was so interesting. And it says exactly what, being merciful and cheerful. He said, Lord, help all the bad people to be good and all the good people to be nice. And I thought, what a powerful statement that little kindergartner said. And that he was cheerful and somebody had taught him well. The Bible goes on to say, love without hypocrisy. It's genuine. Now sometimes down in the South we'll say, you all come on, go home with us. And they don't mean a lick of it. That's not, you still love them, but care for them. That sometimes you hate bad things, whether it's crime, lying, greed, works of the flesh, murder, racism, whatever. Anything that's bad, you hate it. A Christian does. But on the other hand, you got to be balanced. You love things that are good. You see good things done. And we can see it all the time. And this is what our country's having a little difficulty with some folks saying that all policemen are bad. And then all other folks are good. And maybe we have to be careful to be balanced. Christians are able to be balanced. Be devoted to one another in love. You know, I suspected if any one of you were hurt or disabled, that the rest of you would pour in, or if there should be a death, there'd be more food brought in to the family. In fact, somebody was telling me the other day they had a death in their family, and they had so much food they had said, "Stop bringing food! Stop bringing food!" They were Christians. Christians are just that way. In honor, giving preference to one another, not trying to give honor to yourself, but to give honor to others. Bragging on, encouraging, showing others that you care about them. Not lazy. He's saying don't be lazy. Fervent, active, busy, involved, doing things, growing, developing, in service to the Lord. What can you do better tomorrow to help the Lord than you did today? And in a realistic way. And he says, rejoicing in hope. I was talking about that. I go to quite a few funerals of people that have been on the board, and others have been faithful, dedicated Christians. And frankly, I hear the stories. And what a blessing it is. I just come away, well, we should have even known them better, because these people were just absolutely wonderful people. Flawed, yes, we're all flawed. We all make mistakes. But you hear such Christians who have done everything they can to try to be a servant of the Lord, working through troublesome times and events. During this epidemic, not an epidemic, is a pandemic that we had, a lot of people lost their jobs. And one of our son-in-law works for Disney World and does a lot of the writing and designing and advertising for them. Well, they laid him off. He was laid off. And he said he noticed that a lot of the friends, a lot of the people that he worked with became bitter and angry and scared. And some rightfully so, well, how am I going to make it? And they became frustrated and angry at their company. He said, I decided that I'm going to take this. I'm going to see the good side of it, and I'm going to make the best of it. And he said, I got to spend more time with my family over a period of time that I'd ever have. He's an elder in the church. He got to see, they had to work through the problems of the church meeting and how that they would do. While he was at his daughter's graduation, he got a phone call from Disney, his manager at Disney. And he said, you're the first one that we're calling back. We want you back Monday. This was on a Friday. We want you back Monday. And then they called some others later on. And I thought, well, he took the right attitude. He spent time with his children and his family and made the best of it. And you and I, there's always some good that can come out of every situation if we'll look for it. And many times we can develop it in our own minds when others can't see it. But Christians have a way of doing that, working through trouble sometimes. He said to stay regular in prayer. I would not want to sit down and have a lunch or a breakfast without having a prayer. And I noticed that Christians, in some of the best prayers, I sat and listened to Seth last night. Seth, what a neat prayer. That was such a good prayer. I'm embarrassing you, I know. But we were impressed with your prayer last night, my friend. Practicing hospitality. By the way, when you practice hospitality, the real benefit, those who benefit greatest are those who are getting to practice it and having folks in. You all had more fun than anybody there the other day, having all the folks out at your house. Practicing, and you'll see Christians that practice hospitality and have folks in. And hospitality doesn't always mean a meal. In churches, I think we say it, but hospitality means other things also. Bless those who persecute you, and bless and do not curse. Have you ever had somebody that you just had difficulty getting along with? We've all had that, haven't we? The Bible here in Romans chapter 12 tells us how to deal with those folks. He's rejoiced with those who are rejoicing. And by the way, this is where it's easy for us to develop some jealousy. When somebody's being celebrated and good things are happening to them, we sometimes can get a little jealous. But he says, rejoice with those who are rejoicing. But what does he say? Weep with those who are weeping. Have empathy, sympathy, hurt with them. Feel their pain as they are going through that experience. Treat with respect the poor, the rich, the powerful, and even your enemies. Treat them with respect. You know the best way to deal with an enemy? Make a friend out of them. That's the best way that you can deal with them. Some he gives you, later on he says, if it's within your power, if it's within your being. Control your emotions, self-control. Christians have a good balancing way. And they were able to go through this virus thing a lot better than a lot of other folks. A lot of folks committed suicide during this time, couldn't handle it. Never hit back with evil when evil has come to you. I sometimes flinch when I hear our president, I'm going to hit back. If you hit me, I want to hit back. Christians don't do that. We just don't hit back. We have to teach our children not to. We don't try to get back. Respect what is right. Be at peace. Don't stir up trouble. A troublemaker, somebody causes trouble, has to be dealt with. And we can, any one of us can stir up trouble. But he says, Christians don't do that. You're not going to stir up trouble. Let God take the revenge. If you've done everything you can to make friends with and work with and help somebody else, and they still just leave it up to, let God. God said, vengeance is mine. What did he say? I will repay. If your enemy's hungry, what are you supposed to do?
Feed them.
Feed them. If they're thirsty, give them something to drink. There was a lady that I had done everything I knew to get along with her. She had fought everybody. She had a reputation. Fighting everybody. She was adjacent to the school where I was president, Mars Hill Bible School down in Florence, Alabama. I'd done everything I knew. And I just could not seem to get through to her. So I told Laurel, I said, let's have her over for lunch after church on Sunday. We were sitting at lunch. Laurel, as she always does, had a great lunch. All of a sudden, she laid her knife and fork down. She said, Millton, Sewell, I know what you're doing. You're heaping coals of fire on my head right now. Well, I didn't say anything, but that's exact. By the way, she turned to be a fairly good friend after that. Don't allow evil in your life. Don't allow evil in your life. Overcome evil with good, the Bible says. You have to make a decision as to whether or not you want to be a Christian. And I think I just sense right here that there are so many that are trying to live the Romans chapter 12, encouraging chapter. I just see it, and I want to commend you for what you're doing. And we're going home after in the next day or so. We'll go home with a picture of this congregation. It's a good picture, a wonderful picture of good people that care about what's going on. There may be somebody here today that you have not become a Christian, and you studied enough, and you know that if something happened to me, that I wouldn't make it. It may be that today would be the time to do it, to become a Christian. Hear, believe, repent, confess, be baptized, and then start living the Christian life. Or maybe you've wandered away and need the prayers of the congregation, forgiveness of God, forgiveness of others, and you want to make that decision. Why don't you make that right now while we stand and sing?